Hi, and welcome to the Fountaindale Public Library Maker Fair. Today we're going to take a quick look at how to put together a Raspberry Pi and the basic hardware, how to assemble it. This is being presented by the Village of Bolingbrook Information Technology Commission. My name is Mark Behrens. I've been working with the Bolingbrook IT Commission for 2 years now, just a little bit over, and I've got about 21 years of experience in the IT field. What we're going to look at today, the agenda. So what is a Raspberry Pi? In a brief history of where the Raspberry Pi came from. Popular uses, costs, basic part lists, optional parts lists, because there's a lot of flexibility here. What the motherboard looks like, what are the features of it. Quick look into software, although there'll be a second session on how to do the software part. Assembly, a demo of how to put it all together. So the Raspberry Pi is a low-cost credit card-sized computer. It plugs into a computer, monitor, or TV, anything that uses HDMI. It uses a standard keyboard and mouse, assuming it's USB. It enables people of all ages to explore computing. You can learn how to program on it with things like Scratch and Python, which are great beginner programming languages, especially for kids and teenagers. You can do everything that a home computer can do. From browsing the internet and playing high definition video to making spreadsheets, doing word processing, even playing video games. The first prototype was created in 2006. Then the Raspberry Pi Foundation was formed in 2009 as a charity just to make computing more accessible to those in need. It gives it the tools without having to buy an expensive system to be able to learn how to program and put together a computer. The first production version of the Raspberry Pi was released in February 2012. So popular uses, education. So coming with the Raspberry Pi, there are things like programming languages, obviously the ability to browse the internet. There are some teaching games on there, and there are some actual education programs on there. It can be used as a home computer. The great thing about that is plug it into your TV with your keyboard and mouse, and you have a home computer. It has all the word processing, spreadsheeting, just like you would if you had a work computer. The great part about that is it all comes for free with the software. Home automation, if you want to attach it to your Google Home or Alexa, this allows it to, you can have your camera at your doorbell. You can hook it up into the Raspberry Pi to serve for that. Industrial automation, same thing, hook it up to your manufacturing machines, be a way to control things like that. In fact, recently, I think they had some folks in Europe who turned Raspberry Pis into ventilators for the COVID pandemic. Commercial products, retro gaming, you can turn it into an arcade. You can buy or build cases for it and turn it into an actual arcade game like you would have seen way back into a stand if you put that in your basement. Again, learn to program. Robotics, you can build a robot powered by the Raspberry Pi. A cloud server, have your own personal cloud server, which if built right could be more secure than using a public cloud server. Minecraft is already built into it, so you can play that. Creating a media center and creating a weather station. So again, those are just some of the popular uses, but there really is no limit to what can be done with this little computer. So cost. So the Village of Bolingbrook IT Commission a couple of years ago decided to put together a Raspberry Pi as part of our STEM fairs. We wanted to build a computer for less than $100, which we accomplished with change for the purpose of that. We've since upgraded and put some more projects together with it, but the basic costs are still the same. In this case, for what we were trying to accomplish, we spent $86.04. We at the time we bought a Model 3B, which was $29.99. We needed to buy SD cards. We needed the micro SD cards, so a total of $8. A small case, a power supply, keyboard, heatsink, some gaming controllers because we did do the retro arcade game, and then overall taxes. Again, we've upgraded since then, so give or take $10 to $20 if you go to the Raspberry Pi 4 model, which we'll be showing today. So basic parts list. So what do you really need to get started? So on this screen, you can see we need the motherboard. You can see a picture up on the top right. It's a small little credit card sized computer, and you'll see in the demo how small it really is. The micro SD card, preference would be 32 gigabyte or higher. We're using 32 gigabyte ones now, and they seem to work fine for our purposes. But if you're going to use it for something where you need more power or a bigger operating system, because again, there's different things you can install on them. You can also get a bigger SD card. If you're going to be using it as a server, and we'll talk about this on the next slide, you can also get an external hard drive to plug in. A mini HD cable, and we'll talk about how that plugs into a monitor or TV. A case, a power supply, and of course your standard USB keyboards and mouse. That'll get the computer working for you. If you were to, with these parts right here, you could have a working computer once you get the software installed on the SD card. Some optional parts. The heat sink or a cooling fan. Again, with our Raspberry Pi, we don't keep it on for days at a time or even more than a few hours at a time. So we haven't run into a problem with it overheating, but the heat sink will help dissipate the heat from the processor, which does get extremely warm, especially just like a computer, especially if running for a long time. And if you're going to use something like a cloud server or keep it running more than just a few hours at a time, a cooling fan might be recommended, and they do have ones you can buy specifically for the Raspberry Pi. An external hard drive. That way you can keep files you're using with the Raspberry Pi right on the external hard drive, particularly if you're using it as a media center. We do have a media center built for one of our demos, and if you have movies you've purchased online or whatever the case may be, you can put those on your external hard drive. An Ethernet cable, it does have Ethernet a port, so if you want to do something faster like download software, stream, maybe the Ethernet cable is the way to go if you have access to your cable modem or your router, so you could do that as well. Gaming controllers, if you choose to make it into a gaming system or an arcade, the gaming controllers will be obviously helpful. Speakers or headphones, again, you can plug in these headphone jack built in, and you can plug in your headphones or some speakers that go to the headphone jack, or if you're using an HDMI TV, it'll go through the sound in your TV. A camera, there is a specific camera module connection into the Raspberry Pi. So if there's things you can do to make this a camera or to process your photography. A laptop or PC for creating images. Again, if you're starting from scratch, you will at one point need a PC or a laptop and create the images. And that's, again, we'll talk about that in session 2. And then there's many, many things you can put on this depending on the project you're looking to build. Some of the features of the Raspberry Pi. So like I said before, we're discussing the Raspberry Pi 4, which is the latest, the upgrade to the Raspberry Pi. It comes in 2, 4, and 8 gigabyte options of RAM. Obviously, the more RAM, the better it's going to run. We've got the 4, which seems to run fine for our applications. But again, if you're going to use it for more media type stuff or something a little bit more intensive, then maybe upgrading to a bigger one. And of course, that'll cost you more. The Wi-Fi is built in, so you can throw it right on your home Wi-Fi. Bluetooth is built in, so if you have Bluetooth speakers or another Bluetooth device, you can connect that right to your Raspberry Pi. 2 mini HDMI ports, so a nice upgrade in 4 was it gives you 2 ports if you want to use 2 monitors. But again, it is a mini HDMI, so you got to upgrade your cable if you already have a regular HDMI cable. An Ethernet port. 4 USB ports, so you can plug in your mouse, keyboard, and whatever else. The joysticks are USB as well, or the gaming controllers. So you have some flexibility there. An audio jack, general purpose input-output pin. So that's when you get a little bit more advanced if you're building a robot or you want to control some LED lights with programming. Those can be plugged into those input-output pins. Same with the arcade. If you want to build some custom controllers, you can use those input-output pins to do that. There's a camera module port for a webcam and a micro SD card slot. So some of the features of the Raspberry Pi. So here's a diagram of what the motherboard looks like. And again, it's just a credit card size computer, which has pretty much everything that a computer has on it, just smaller. You can see on the top there, you have the general purpose input output pins. That way you can connect electronic components. Using that, you can control something like a robot. You can control LED lights or whatever other project you might have. that can go through those input-output pins. To the right, you have an Ethernet port and USB ports. You can plug in your keyboard, mouse, hard drive, or if you want to plug it directly into your router or cable modem, you get it right there. An audio jack, a camera module port, so you can basically make this a camera. And again, there's a lot of cool little cameras you can plug right into there for fairly cheap, and you can even buy little tripods for them. Might be cool if you're making videos like today, you don't want to use the little cam on your computer. 2 HDMI ports, so that'll again allow you to go to 2 computers. If you're using it for a home computer, you're working on one, watching TV on the other. Micro USB power, and then a micro SD card, which is underneath, which is again, just that's how you would boot up your system. That's your storage, assuming you don't have anything else plugged in, and your operating system and how the Raspberry Pi boots up. The software. So again, we're not too focused on software in this one. We'll do a second session on how the software gets installed, but just to give a brief overview, there's dozens of available Linux-based operating systems. So anything from, like we said, the gaming systems to operating systems to media centers, all Linux-based. So there's many options you could turn your Raspberry Pi into, and basically they're all free to download from the internet. Raspberry Pi OS is the official supported operating system. It used to be known as Raspbian. This comes pre-installed with software for education, programming, entertainment, productivity, and web browsing. So anything that your home computer can do, for the most part, is included in this operating system. Again, it's an easy image to make off the Raspberry Pi Foundation website. And like I said, it's an all-in-one for a home computer, and the best part is it's free. It's got the capability to install and configure additional software for media. So there's a lot you can do with the Raspberry Pi, and it's all open source. The OS can be downloaded from the Raspberry Pi Foundation's website and then imaged to a SD card, which again will be in another session on how to do that. So for some further information, you can go to the Raspberry Pi Foundation. That'll have just about everything you're looking for there, on how it works, where to download software, how to install it. Just about everything I used to put one together was on the raspberrypi.org Foundation website. You can always come to the Bolingbrook IT Commission's website. There is a place to contact us if you have questions based on this. We can go ahead and answer them through there. The Fountaindale Library, again, go to their website and you can see this video again, or find further resources from the IT Commission or other commissions to learn about that. And then YouTube, a lot of great videos, just hundreds of videos on how to, on projects you can do with the Raspberry Pi, from very simple to advanced. And then, which we didn't talk about, is where to buy them, but you can find most of the parts we talked about on Amazon. You can find them on stores like Micro Center, which is where we bought all these parts, and just a dozen of other different places around the internet. And if putting it together is one thing that you may not want to do, even though we're showing assembly and it is fairly easy. They do have kits that come all pre-assembled with the software, so all you have to really do is plug it into your TV, plug it into the wall, and you're good to go. So you can again that costs a little extra, but again, there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of options where you can make it as easy as possible, or play with it some more and build it on your own. So now we're going to do a demo of the Raspberry Pi and how we put it together. You'll see all the different pieces that we showed in the parts list, and we'll take them all from the pile of pieces into a working computer. We'll bring it up, show everybody how it works. Welcome to the demo part of the presentation. What we've talked about so far is the different parts of the Raspberry Pi, where to get them, how much they cost, what the Raspberry Pi is, and what you can do with it. For the presentation, now I want to show how easy it is to put it together and explain all the different real parts that we have put together that puts this thing together. It's a very simple procedure to put this thing together. There's not a lot of parts for the basic Raspberry Pi, but let's take a look first at the actual Raspberry Pi itself. Just to show in comparison, I've got a library card here, same size as the library card, so it really is a credit card or library card size computer.
And for that small, it's got a lot of different components to it that we looked at in the presentation. But first we'll look at the back of it where it's got the USB port. So you can see there's 4 USB ports, so you can plug in keyboards, mouse, hard drive storage, any standard USB component. There's also an Ethernet port, so if you don't want to be using your Wi-Fi or you want something to work faster other than on Wi-Fi, like you're downloading software, you can plug it right into your cable modem or router. On the side of it, some different inputs as well. There's and outputs. There's an output jack for your headphones right in here. So you can plug it into computer speakers that have a standard output or a standard headphone jack or your headphones. It also has Bluetooth built in, so if you have Bluetooth or speakers or Bluetooth headphones, you can use that as well. It does here, I'll tilt this up a little bit. This is a camera module. You can plug in a camera that's specifically built for this. You can use this as a webcam, or even some people have used this, like we said, home automation. Plug in your cam right there. There are 2 mini HDMI ports right here. And those now you can use with this version of the Raspberry Pi, you can use 2 different monitors, like some might use for work. You can do that here as well. That's an upgrade in the Raspberry Pi 4, which this version is, and we've been talking about. And then there's your power. Again, standard power that we defined in the presentation. They have ones made for Raspberry Pi, but again, these can be bought, just where everything else is. The last few things, just general input and output pins. You can kind of see them here. This is if you're going to do some advanced projects with the Raspberry Pi, for example, a robot. You want to control LED lighting. And if you want to create programs for that, you can do that using these output pins for the physical wire connection. Or if you're going to make an actual arcade cabinet to have your arcade games play, you can use this for your controllers, your custom controllers, if you want to do an advanced project with the Raspberry Pi. Again, there's tons of different projects with that. On the front of it, on the bottom, and it's kind of hard to see, but this is where you would slide in your micro SD card, which will boot up the computer, hold your operating system, and some of your storage. Again, you can also use an external hard drive for storage. A lot of people use these as mini cloud servers, so if you want to plug in external hard drives, keep it as a cloud server, you can do that through the USB. The last part of note is the CPU, which is on the board. Again, these get warm, just like any other computer. Couple things that we talked about that can go on here is a heat sink that'll help disperse the heat from the CPU, or there are fans that can be built into the cases specifically for a Raspberry Pi that can also be used to keep that. Again, that's for something if you're going to be running this thing 24 hours a day and keeping it on, that would be an important piece to buy. I don't have one here, but for a couple hours at a time, then we haven't seen the need for that. All right. These 3 black pieces here are the case assembly. We'll put that together, but this can house it, and there's tons of different cases out there, ranging from very cheap to very expensive. You can create your own with a 3D printer, decorate them as much as you want. They've got tons of possibilities that you can purchase or make. The last little component that assembles right into the Raspberry Pi is the micro SD card. These come with an adapter, so when we talk about the software, you can put this into your laptop or desktop computer. It'll transfer it onto the mini SD part, which is, I know, hard to see. And that's basically the storage and the software of the computer, depending on whatever OS. Tons of OSs you can display on there. This would all go on here. We do recommend at least a 32 gigabyte mini SD card or larger, just to hold the operating systems. As far as other hardware, just a standard USB keyboard. Again, we got this for a couple bucks, so you might even have a few laying around your house from older computers. As long as it's USB, it'll work. Standard USB mouse. Again, a couple bucks. Probably have them laying around your house. So that's all you really need to use it for a mouse, especially if you can use an operating system. Again, you can plug game controllers into the USB as well there. A couple of wires we need to plug in. The mini HDMI. So this will hook into the monitor, but it is a mini HDMI, so you have to be careful. Make sure you buy the mini HDMI. The larger HDMI doesn't work with the Raspberry Pi 4. It does with the 3. And then the power source, which is pretty much like a phone power source if you have an Android phone. Again, this one is particularly built for the Raspberry Pi, probably the best to go with that, but the specifications are in the presentation on which ones to get, what size. All right. And then the last piece, which again doesn't necessarily come with the parts list that we had put together, was the monitor. You can use a TV. As long as it has an HDMI input, you can use a TV, computer monitor, whatever the case may be to do that. So there's a lot of different options there, and we assume everyone has a TV, so if you wanted to start playing with it right away without a monitor, TV would be a great bet. So let's take a look at the assembly. First, I want to show the Raspberry Pi 3, which is slightly different, but basically the same thing, same size. This one has a clear case on it, so it is assembled. The big difference here is the big HDMI, where that one has the mini HDMI, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same assembly. I just like the clear case on this. I couldn't find one for the Pi 4 at the time. All right, so let's take a look at basic assembly. Again, these are built for it, so you probably have to get specs off the internet if you want to build a custom one. What we'll do is we'll slide into the bottom. If I can get the right bottom. We can put the top, the middle part on, or the top, which actually labels where some of the stuff is located, so it's easy to line up. And then there's a cover for it, so it doesn't get all full of dust, and there is some ventilation. Again, this particular cover even has a place we talked about the camera, has a place for the camera if you want to get the specific Raspberry Pi camera. Cover that up. The first thing I'm going to do now to get this operating is put in the SD card. If I line it up properly. The SD card goes with the metal facing up. And then once that's inserted in, it should be done there. Then we can plug in the components. I'm going to plug in no particular order other than the power last. I'll plug in the HDMI cable, which is already connected to the monitor. I'll plug in keyboard. And I'll plug in the mouse. All right. And the last piece here, it's already plugged into the wall, but here's the power. I'll plug it into the side here. We'll turn on our monitor, and we'll see. And while this is coming, we'll see if this thing comes up. Now you can see while this is booting up, there are some commands. It boots up pretty fast, but there are some commands that get run. It's all a Linux operating system in the background. And then shortly we should see the actual Raspberry Pi OS pop up. And there we go. You can see the Raspberry Pi. It's similar to a Windows desktop. I'm going to turn it just slightly so I can see what I'm doing. What I'm going to do, just to show this part of it, is just open up a browser. And as we discussed in the presentation, there's a lot of capabilities that come with this Raspberry Pi OS. There's an Office-like program where you have your spreadsheets, Word documents, etc. There's programming languages that come built into it. There's a few games, including Minecraft, a couple education tools. Again, so it's a very productive operating system, particularly that it's for free. And then what I'm going to do is just load a web page, because like we said, Wi-Fi is built into it. And you can obviously use it as a web browser. So as that's loading, you can see our webpage loading, and that's pretty much it. Again, we'll be doing a second session with the software, so we can go into deeper how to create this or how to image the software, how to get into the different pieces like the Word documents and spreadsheets, and the different programming languages. Again, a different session. So I invite you to take a look at the next slide, which will show all the different resources where you can learn more about the Raspberry Pi or ask questions.